Calling the September 12th, 2019 Traffic Safety Bikeway Pedestrian Committee to order. First order of business will be the approval of the August 2019 minutes.
I move approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? No opposed and no abstention. Okay, the next item on the agenda is the appearance of interested citizens.
Yeah, sorry.
Yes.
Phyllis is back there, but y'all didn't sign up, did you? That's okay, because
He's not interested.
Yeah, he's not interested.
Maybe he's gonna go out the door, I better close it.
Okay. State your name and city of residence.
Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. My name is Jonathan Thompson. I reside on Trent Avenue in Kaiser. I'm here today to see if we can find a way for pedestrians and basketball hoops to coexist. The street where our small business is located is shared between cars, pedestrians, bikes, and mass transit. It's also part of a bike route which attracts riders from all over the world. Thanks to Hirsch, and I won't get him started on it tonight, I promise. In our neighborhood, I empathize with the folks who use the sidewalks that are now blocked by basketball hoops. I walk my neighborhood almost nightly, and there are many around. We also have a basketball hoop for our daughter, or for whom my retirement's sake, I hope is the next Michael Jordan. But as we try to encourage kids to turn off the TV and get outside, there should be something for them to do when they get out there. In our case, the closest park to our house is across a busy street, and there are no basketball hoops. The closest school to our home is across two busy streets, and the hoops are tucked back behind. It's not a place where our daughter can be without close supervision. I appreciate the ordinance that was passed by the council being dealing with basketball hoops being complaint driven. That is a positive step. Next, it is my hope we can figure out some kind of a safe harbor. So after a complaint is filed, hoops can still be available for kids and sidewalks can still be kept open. My suggestion is that in places where typical hoops are an issue, families be allowed to set posts on the sidewalk. In this case, the sidewalks will be available for both groups, both pedestrians and basketball hoops. Assuming we come up with a workable plan, my family would be happy to install one as an example for others who may want or need to go that route. So what I'm here today to ask is for us to get creative and see if we can figure out how kids can play basketball and people can still walk down the sidewalk. So I thank you for your time, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
What do you mean by putting posts in the sidewalk?
I mean, drill a hole in the sidewalk and stick the post in it. You put it just behind the curb. As you know, with the current basketball standard, they're 3.5 or 4 feet long, and they block the whole sidewalk.
Right.
And they're heavy.
And could you just, and then if you just right behind the curb, drill the hole, I mean, you're talking about not even a 6-inch post.
Right.
Drop it right in.
Yeah.
That you could take in and out,
No,
or that would be
permanent.
cemented in?
Permanent. I mean, for all intents and purposes, I know there's been discussion on the current ordinance about these basketball hoops being portable. If you do as the manufacturers instruct and you fill them with water or sand, they're not portable. So, I mean, I understand that they have wheels, but they're not portable, so.
Is this?
On the
Okay,
agenda.
so this is on our agenda later, right?
Well, it's,
Under new business.
yeah. Yeah. So, we could, I don't know if we want to.
Did you have any idea what that would, you're talking about the individual property owner, homeowner, putting that in front of their house? Do you have any idea what that would cost?
I do not. You know, I think it would probably, a lot would depend on what the requirements, I mean, I'm sure there's going to be some kind of a requirement for, to make it safe and all that, and, you know, locating and not drilling through a sewer line and all that kind of stuff. So I'm sure, I think that all depends on what the regulations look like.
Committee members?
You know, I went around our neighborhood, and we're at the other side, and not only did I see some basketball hoops clearly blocking the whole thing. We've also seen some in the stormwater area mounted. And so, you know, I understand ADA and wanting to work, and your comment about wanting kids playing, I'm right there with you. My old state risk manager hat, when I put that on, I see an individual putting in a post, who's liable for when somebody runs into it, who's liable for all those. So there's a lot of questions that need to be answered and stuff. To me, this situation was a complaint driven, which bless their hearts. But I see this as one where we can have neighbor to neighbor solutions quicker than making, and I'm not taking pot shots at staff or council, from a kid standpoint, a draconian rule.
I agree with you, Hirsch. In fact, I testified at council opposed to the whole thing, but as I could count the votes and I lost. So now I'm trying to figure out what we can do, because at 30 days from last week, an ordinance goes into effect that these hoops are banned. So, I mean, and I understand it's complaint driven and there may be no complaints, I don't know. But if there is a complaint, I would like homeowners to have some kind of a safe harbor to still let their kids have a basketball hoop.
Kind of a follow-up. We have to protect our seniors and disabled, and they have to have access, and kids and all of that. And most of them are in our neighborhood on cul-de-sacs, low-density streets and stuff, where there is a lot of walking. And so we want to protect them and have access. I don't know if a rule is the best thing right off. I always think education first, and a good educational through the city, the neighborhood associations, that, hey guys, look at your basketball hoops. You know, is it screwing up the flow of the stormwater drain? Or is it blocking? If somebody was a wheelchair, and we, in our, off of Willow Lake, we have a couple kids that are in wheelchairs. Is it blocking? And then if that doesn't work, then some more negotiation, and then a rule. That's my thought on that, but there you go. I'm finished.
I have a question on, I don't know if Mike can answer it or Bill. Would cementing in a post like that be stable?
Depending upon how it's mounted, yeah.
Would that be something that would be something that would cause damage to the sidewalk without some professional installation?
Continued use, and as kids are, eventually it could do damage to the sidewalk, which then falls back on the homeowner to replace said issue.
Good question.
Well, I spoke today with both Megan and then Ben in the code enforcement, Kaiser Code Enforcement Department. And so I got several different bits of information around this, and I don't know if you want to share that now, or are we moving this agenda item up?
This agenda item is after an interested citizen, so it's really.
Yeah, I think I'm just rolling them together.
Okay, well, I hadn't really considered the idea of somebody permanently mounting the basketball hoops, but my main concern was that it is important to keep the sidewalk, any bike lane, and the roadway unimpeded for the passage of the traffic, whether car, bike, or person walking, wheelchairs, strollers, and so forth. So where should a person put that bicycle standard? On the sidewalk, obviously, is I don't think it should be allowed. If they have a planter strip between the sidewalk and the street, not like a planted one, but like grass, planted strip, that would be a good spot. It doesn't impede traffic of any of those modes. Also, it could be possibly in the parking area of the street, if there's a parking area, or if there's, as long as you still got, 20 feet or so passage on the street, I wouldn't see a problem with them being there. The question then becomes how, and I think it's the question posed to this committee, what is active use and how long would we allow a basketball hoop to be placed in the parking zone or extra shoulder of a road? So what I found out was, I said, well, we allow people to park other personal property there, their cars, for instance, trailers, so forth. And I found out that there actually is a limit of 72 hours on parking your car. Somebody could complain and ask you to move your car if you haven't moved it in 72 hours. Only 48 hours for utility trailers, and those come under parking ordinances. And then there's a different ordinance that applies to things that are not a vehicle, bark dust or construction equipment or something like that. So where are we going to consider the basketball hoops? There's also been some complaints from drivers of the larger vehicles, like school buses, delivery trucks, and so forth, that the bicycle hoop, the base of it is maybe only a couple of feet, but usually the poles are angled towards the road, and so they are encroaching a bit more, and those are hard to see, I guess, by drivers sometimes of the larger vehicles, and they've complained about hitting them because they couldn't see them very well. So I guess we need to consider the issue of visibility if we allow it to be placed in the parking area against the curb, and for how long. One idea that I asked the staff about was, what if a person was allowed to place the somewhat portable basketball hoops in the parking area, but required to turn it sideways after using it. Now, I didn't have it. I don't know if two children can turn that 90 degrees after they're done so that it's only sticking 2 or 3 feet out into the parking area and much more visible, because you would see the face of the backboard rather than just the side of the board and the hoop. So that's just kind of a brainstorming idea that I posed to staff, and I guess now to the rest of the committee here. My view on it was overall that the guidance to council would be, let people place them where they can on or adjacent to their yard, as long as it's not impeding the sidewalk, bike, or cars. And I guess I would say, as far as active use, my own opinion would be longer than 3 days, but probably shorter than weekly, or, I think 15 days was maybe one of the time periods suggested on city council. And I would say maybe, at what week do you want to have a valid complaint that somebody's not using it? 1 week or 2 weeks, something like that. That they either need to take it down, move it, or whatever. So I think that, so that kind of recaps what I found out from talking to staff today.
So Jonathan, you were saying this installation could be a kind of a multi-family use thing. Who would then be responsible for it?
I'm just using myself as an example. The basketball hoop that sits between my house and my neighbor's house, we went together and we bought it, and his kids are now, one of them's out of the house and one of them's on the way out of the house, and my daughter's 10 now, but it was we bought it together as 2 families, and it sits there, and we all used it and still use it. The neighborhood kids use it. I don't know that you could dictate it be, I mean, that's going to have to be, like Hirsch says, neighbors working it out. I don't think you can dictate that, each block can have one and you guys have to get together and decide where it goes, but just to follow up with what Committee Member Fisher said, my hope with, I understand now that they're allowed to be, under the new ordinance, they're allowed to be in the street as long as they're moved by 10 o'clock at night. But that doesn't really get at the stormwater issue because they're blocking the drain there. So that was my thing about mounting it just behind the curb, that it wouldn't block the sidewalk, or wouldn't block the drain, is what I'm.
I like it.
I think that the time got excluded from that they didn't set a time between. Yeah.
Oh, you
okay.
didn't?
So there is no time, so you're back to
Okay.
that active use part
Okay.
in it, which pretty much allows, as long as they're using it,
Right, okay.
most of the time.
I might have glazed over by that point in the meeting.
Well, if we're just talking, it sounds like a good idea to me. It's better than having them in the street, which we have. It doesn't really bother me much one way or the other. I thought, well, where were they? Well, we had them on street corners every intersection when I was in Portland. But I was just thinking, the neighborhood I grew up in, I can't think of anybody with a sloped driveway. Everything was level. So now I notice I'm walking down the street, you can't play basketball in your driveway because it's not, a lot of them anyway. It's not level.
Councilor Kohler?
Thank you, Chairman DePlazzi. Mayor Clark asked me to bring this to the committee. Part of the reason is they were trying to determine what is active use, and I thought rather than have the council sit for 20 minutes and try to figure out what active use is, this would be a better committee to determine what that might be. The ordinance also calls right now for a reflective strip to be put on the standards so that it might be able to be seen at night if it's out in the street. So that is in the ordinance. But the question that was posed earlier is, can we put those in the sidewalk? And I think Bill Oyer might be a good one to ask about that and see how he feels about it and what Public Works thinks about that part of it. But what we're asking this committee to do is really figure out how do we allow all those things to coexist, because we want our kids to be able to play, and we also want people to be able to use the walks. So that was your quest.
Well, Jonathan, would you mind letting Bill?
Not at all.
Thank you.
Good evening. Basketball hoops in sidewalks, behind sidewalks, on sidewalks. Clearly temporary ones, no. Permanent ones, or I'll call them permanent, okay? Nothing is ever permanent, as we all know, but we'll call them permanent. I see a couple of options that would be acceptable to Public Works. One, as Mr. Thompson mentioned, drill a hole in the concrete, excavate a hole, set a post in the ground, concrete it back in, put your standard up, play basketball. The other one would be to set the post behind the sidewalk and then an arm that comes out over two-face of curb or into the street, whatever the homeowner chose to have built. And again, that would be concreted in place. I think that it's important that the full 5 feet of sidewalk be maintained in either scenario. And so if the pole is put behind the sidewalk, you've got the full sidewalk there. If it's put behind the curb or somewhere in the actual sidewalk, then the sidewalk should be widened by a foot. I'm going to say a foot just for discussion purposes. It might not be a total of a foot, but I think that generally that's going to be safe in an area that provides a full 5-foot sidewalk on both sides of that post. That would be acceptable. I see it possible to bolt one to the sidewalk with a big enough plate and, anchors drilled into the concrete. Probably the widening of the sidewalk piece will deter a lot of those installations because that plate's going to have to be pretty sizable to hold up a basketball standard. But that's the three options I could see, Mike and I have talked about it, that would make sense on how that could be done. And I don't see that we would be in opposition to any of those as long as the full 5-foot sidewalk is maintained in that area.
What about mounting them if possible, if they're there, street lamp posts or
No.
power poles?
No. The streetlights, for the most part, are owned by the power companies. Power poles are owned by the power companies. I'm going to guess they're not going to give permission for that. They could ask, you could ask, but instinctively, I'm going to say they're probably not going to want to do that.
Okay.
Maybe a pole, but certainly not a streetlight.
Hirsch?
Or was Pat
Go
before?
ahead. Oh.
My question is back to liability. Who would be liable for damage, maintenance?
Well, Hirsch, that's ultimately for a court to decide. I think we all know that.
Yeah,
But given that per city ordinance, the maintenance of the sidewalk is the homeowner's responsibility, I think it's primarily going to be the homeowner.
okay.
We
I
all
just
know
wondered.
how things work and how attorneys go after the big pockets and
Yeah.
all that. No
That's-
guarantees.
That's beyond us.
Exactly. But I think, because of the ordinance and the way the ordinance is written, that liability first goes to the property owner.
So also if the person, some of our neighbors over in our neighborhood with it, blocking the sidewalk with their completely, they would be in violation of a federal rule, would they not?
I honestly
The
don't know.
ADA.
I believe that would violate the ADA standards.
Right.
Whether there's a law around that in that situation, I don't know.
But one in a wheelchair could file suit.
Potentially,
Yeah.
yeah, potentially. And the whole goal behind the sidewalk, the change to the sidewalk ordinance is to keep the sidewalks free and clear. That's the goal. And, clearly placing a basketball hoop, these portable hoops there, does not do that.
Would you have a permit system for something like that then? They would petition to your office, show you a drawing, or you go out and look at where they're going to place it, front of walk or back of walk, and what they're going to do to retain the full use of the walkway, like extra paving, like you said, might be needed behind?
I would say probably. I have thought about that a little bit, and to make sure that, the only way to really make sure that the travel is maintained, the 5-foot travel is maintained, is to do some kind of an inspection by city staff. I guess that would be a permit, something along those lines.
I would feel better if we did have that, yeah.
Yeah, I know that I don't want the Public Works Department or Public Works staff to approve a design for a basketball standard that says this is adequate and this is going to stand up. I don't want us to do that. That's going to have to be on the property owner to come up with a design. I'm sure it's not overly complicated. You drill a hole big enough, you put a post in there, you fill it full of concrete, it's going to stand. But from the sidewalk standpoint and maintaining the 5-foot width, I think some form of a quote permit would be necessary.
I'm thinking there are a lot of basketball standards out there now that, if you've passed the ordinance today, it's going to be a long time before all those others disappear, so you're probably still going to have to be dealing with the ones in the street and on the sidewalks now going forward for a while, unless you say, okay, we're going to put tickets on everyone that's, and require you to install it. So I think you're still going to have to deal with
The movable ones.
Yeah, with the movable ones.
Oh, it's complaint driven.
Yeah. And
I have
that's
two
what
of them on my street, and everybody's happy with them. The kids have been nice about it, and nobody's complaining, so they're gonna stay there until somebody
Until
complains
someone
about it.
complains.
And that's not I'm not responsible for code enforcement, okay?
Who is? Oh.
So I'm not gonna speak for code enforcement, how they would handle it, but from the sidewalk standpoint, it's pretty simple, it can't be there. It just can't be there. Get
Okay.
it off sidewalk.
Yeah.
Now, in the street, that's a whole different discussion, and I'm just not gonna get into that one because it's not my area, and, you know, the determination of active use is a pretty
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
broad
if you get 3 weeks of
statement.
rain, you're not going to be using it, you know?
But I do want to say that I have in my neighborhood a basketball standard that's placed behind the sidewalk that comes out to the face of the curb, and it's been there for many, many years. The homeowner now has pulled down the hoop because his kids have grown and moved on, and it attracted a lot of activity. He kind of got tired of it, so he took the hoop down. The pole's still there, could be put back up again, but that's really, I think, the best installation. You don't have to worry about widening the sidewalk, you don't have an impact of damaging the sidewalk, and it functions really well, so.
Yeah, you mentioned widening the sidewalk.
Mm-hmm.
and Based on that, I was thinking, maybe it would be a good thing to have a combination of a bulb out for a crosswalk, not at at an intersection, of course, but at a mid-block or something, that you could then mount a pole, so it's off the sidewalk. You've got a little shorter crossing for people who want to cross mid-block.
See, I don't think that's functional on a local street. See, we're talking about local streets here, residential local streets. You don't want to put a bulb out on a local street because they're too narrow to begin with.
A 4-foot, 5-foot bulb out would be.
Well, you take up a parking spot, it's my opinion.
Yeah.
I mean,
we
again, we're
took out
talking
more
about,
parking
for the
for,
most part, basketball hoops on local streets. You don't see those on collectors and
Right.
certainly not on arterials.
Right.
Maybe on some collectors, maybe, but certainly not on arterials, so.
Okay. Yes, Councilor Cullen?
Thank you, Chair de Blasi. What about height restrictions? Is there a maximum or minimum that it has to be in height-wise to go over the walk?
I think the minimum is on a walkway 10 feet, basketball hoops 10 feet high, so there's no real conflict
Same
there.
as tree, same
And,
as
Do
tree.
people put them lower if they have small kids or
Well,
not?
That's a whole nother dynamic there. You know, the ones that I've seen that are permanent are fixed 10-foot hoops. They're not adjustable. I suppose somebody could design something that's adjustable for their smaller kids, and that could present a problem if they don't raise it back up when they're done. Absolutely. I've not
For
seen one like
signs in the
that.
sidewalk, it's something like 7 feet. I think,
7
isn't
feet are signs, and I think the ordinance is, I thought it was 8 feet on a sidewalk, but not 10. But a basketball hoop, a 10-foot basketball hoop does not violate that ordinance, I will say it that way.
What else does he need from us?
Thank you, Chair de Blasi. My question is that something that you feel that the residents, Jonathan, do you think the residents of Kaiser could live with?
Just looking for options, you know? If nobody complains about your basketball hoop, then it's fine. But if somebody complains, what option does the homeowner have? And if it's, if one of the options is mounting it behind, that's great. If one of the options is mounting it in the front and extending the sidewalk, because that works better for that, great. Just, if somebody complains, I'd just like families to have an option on what to do next.
Do you think those are acceptable options? Thank you, that's what I was getting.
So if someone does complain and we give someone options like that, I would assume we'd have to have you're gonna fix it by X date.
Well, of course,
Yeah.
and that turns into an enforcement thing. And we always give notice, we have to. We have to give notice, we have to give them an opportunity to comply. So
Okay. Or-
I'm kind of in agreement with what I'm hearing, but there's one thing, that kind of bothers me a little bit is that I think being driven just by complaints, there's a certain of unfairness in it, but that's the way we have to in Kaiser. I know that's the way it is. So with that in mind, I really think we should have a little bit of a community education through our neighborhood associations and other media saying, hey, take a look at your basketball hoop. This is coming down the pike. See if you instead of basing it on complaints, a little education. I really believe a good number of the homeowners will say, uh-oh, I better go out and check and do that. And do that before we do any regulation. But I like what I'm hearing as far as being able to have it in the streets and and protecting the sidewalks for those users. But, you know, first thing somebody's going to say, well, that person over there doesn't have to do it. And I just like to get some education first.
Does a complaint have to be from a person, anybody, not just somebody in that street or neighborhood?
I was told that it could be a complaint from somebody in Portland.
We don't check residency.
Right.
And one other thing I want to point out, that the ordinance, the new ordinance also requires reflective.
That's what- Now, there are two vehicles that come in close to the curbs throughout Kaiser. You know, the sanitation trucks and our wonderful street sweeper. Post office. And the post
And the
office,
mail.
yeah. So with that in mind, would having it, what we're suggesting, reflective, be okay?
It's okay as a car parked in the street when the street sweeper comes around.
Right, okay.
And it's okay as when the car's in the way, the garbage truck picking up the garbage cans.
And if it's blocking, they don't pick it up.
I mean, it happens.
So, does anyone have any suggestions for this active use period? Well, seeing none, we'll have I was going to have Councilor Kohler have.
I think Mr. Brown probably has an opinion on what
Yeah.
active use is. But before we get to that, I think one of the things that I talked about in council that kind of got pushed away was that we really can't legislate common sense. And common sense isn't near as common as it used to be. I have a neighbor across the street from me. He had one that was in behind the sidewalk, and his kids have grown up and they've moved out of the house, and he went out with a Sawzall and cut it off, and it's gone. So to me, that was a common sense thing. It's not being used. He said, you know what? It's time to move that. So if we can be adults and talk to our neighbors and communicate with each other, well, we wouldn't need a lot of these silly little ordinances. But anyway, that's my 25 cents worth.
The only thing I wanted to point out about the active use, council actually did discuss whether or not it should be a time period, and they were leaning towards that. I argued against that because if you put a time period, if you put a 15-day time period, or whatever that time period is, it is not just a time period. Somebody has to actually document when it starts and when the duration of that time period is. You're basically doubling the work effort. So when we leave it try to say common sense, when we know that never, our attorneys, he already has had words with me about this, but the reality is, if you just simply say, look, it's got to be a basketball standard that is in active use. And if it's been sitting there, clearly not being used, I don't really want to have to document some time period and double the time that Ben has to go out and deal with the issue.
Right.
So that's why it stood at just active use.
From all the discussion and how I'm swaying, the big issue was keeping the sidewalks clear. The time, I remember my kids and now the new kids in my neighborhood, they'll play at the basketball hoop all evening. And then I never see them for 6 months, and then they're back to the hoop. So, and with our weather up and down, I think Nate has a good point. It's the nature of Kaiser is that we don't have a lot of staff and funding to do major enforcement and timing and all that. And common sense, it's back to the neighbors. If that basketball hoop is bothering the neighbors, then they need to kind of talk to each other and see, and go, the neighborhood associations have been, unfortunately, we only have 3, but we're going to work on it, right? And that's another good forum to work out problems. That's my.
Did the council discuss any, I don't know, different wording than active use? I mean, it seems like that active use is catching people, and it sort of means like maybe as soon as you got done playing that day, then you're no longer actively using it, whereas you're talking about it is periodically used or regularly used or something like that.
Yeah, Member Fisher, one of the reasons I suggested that we move it to this committee was because they were getting ready to come up with a time period, and I really didn't like that, and I thought that we probably could figure that out in this type of a setting a lot easier than in the middle of a council meeting. I think active use, I know Mr. Johnson doesn't like that, but I like that a lot better than saying this many days or this many hours, because if I have a basketball hoop that isn't being used in my neighborhood and I know it hasn't been used for a long time and there's a problem with it, I'm probably going to go talk to my neighbor and say, you know what, can we move this? It doesn't look like anybody's using it, and we'll work it out. But then if he says, by golly, this has been here for a long time, well, then I do have teeth. I can say, okay, we need to do this. This has not been an active use. Ben can approach him and say, we've had a complaint. This is what's going on. Can you show me active use? And he'll go, well, and then we go. So I would much rather just see it active use and leave it, but then that's up to this committee to recommend to council.
And I'd have to say, assuming they're not blocking the sidewalk or any other problems like that, I think I've seen a lot worse things people have left in front of their house than a basketball court or a basketball hoop.
So, question, how do we go, what kind of recommendation do we make? What was expected of us
From the council.
from the council?
I feel like we're all turning to everybody.
Yeah, everybody's looking, no, I'm just saying, I'm here reading section 1, says this, this, and this.
I don't have
Do we change it, or do we ask somebody else to change this page, or what?
So
What did you expect us to
It
do?
sounds like maybe we weigh in on whether active use should be a defined time period or whether it should be
That's one
a
thing.
context-driven.
That's
yeah, there's a
decision.
couple of things. One, can we allow, do you recommend allowing things like drilling the sidewalk or mounting it behind the sidewalk? Do you want to put a definition of active use? If you do, then you can add that. If you don't, say we would like to just leave it at active use. So they're looking for recommendations of what you think would be safe.
And then somebody else will rewrite this.
Mr. Chair?
Okay,
Yes.
that's what I wanted to know who was writing what.
If I could, I sent you all emails this week, and the mayor's request had nothing to do with the active use. Her request was for you to find alternative ways to be able, for children to have their basketball hoops that would be ADA compliant. That was basically all she said. I think this committee could make a recommendation to council saying something like, when a complaint is lodged against a hoop, the owners of the hoop be given the option to install the poles on either side of their sidewalk as long as the sidewalk remains 5 feet wide, or something along that line. I think what she's looking for from you is a recommendation to keep the sidewalk clear but still allow children to play.
And that's where I was leaning, although having the height, minimum height added to that as well. Does that sound reasonable?
If we get it into a sentence.
Sure.
Well,
Yeah.
I bet Debbie could do that.
So we're talking about, Bill gave 3 options that were okay with Public Works, probably. Assuming the lawyer likes it.
The game lawyer, not the name lawyer.
Yeah.
Yeah, right,
Yeah.
okay.
I just wanted to mention, if we proceed, move forward with this, and we do create a permit system for these, part of that will be informing the property owners of the height restrictions.
So we don't have,
Already in place. It's
Okay.
already part of the city ordinances, so that doesn't need to be addressed as part of this as well. Okay.
Okay, so it seems to me there's two pieces. One is the active use issue,
That we're
and
not,
That we're,
that we're not,
The
that we're
word-
not charged with weighing in on.
well, we don't,
Nothing about active use, but she asked for you to.
okay, so we don't, if we don't say anything about it, it's fine the way it is. Everybody okay with that?
well, if that's the direction. Personally, I like the word, leave it at active use or regular use.
Yeah, I'm
and
fine
just
with
leave it
that,
at that. But that's a side discussion, it sounds like.
yeah, you have something?
Guess I would make a motion that this committee supports allowing homeowners to install a basketball hoop mounted in the sidewalk, subject to guidance and permit from Public Works Department.
And
Well,
allow them the use of the street too.
or on the other
Well, that's for
side.
permanent, yes.
No.
And that this committee recommends allowing the movable bicycle, basketball hoops to be allowed next to the street or in the street, as long as it does not impede pedestrian, bicycle,
I
or
think that's-
motorized traffic. And that is, yeah.
I think that's already.
Subject to, what's it called, complaint-driven enforcement.
Well,
So
or,
we could just let it go. I don't think we need that because that's what we've got.
Yeah, so
Okay.
the ordinance that was passed actually has to come back for a second reading, allows them in the street, as long as they're being actively used. The big question was, what about the sidewalk? In what circumstances could they be placed within the realm of sidewalks?
And we,
And
The post.
So if what I heard you say is that as long as they can sink a post in the sidewalk, as long as the 5-foot width is maintained, is that correct?
Yes.
Or they can mount it either in a planting strip or behind the sidewalk and project out over is fine.
Acceptable.
Is that what I heard?
I think that's what we need.
yeah,
right.
Make a suggestion.
Yes, Council.
How about allow homeowners to permanently mount standards in or behind sidewalks per permitted standards?
Ooh, nice.
Well, I want to say who's permitting it.
The city.
Well, the city.
Yeah.
yeah.
As long as the width is maintained. I think that's the key. That was the question about what do you do about ADA access?
Well, my motion is a little bit different, though, because in my motion, that I'll see if everybody agrees with, I do want somebody from city staff to go and visit with that person, see the place, and say, yes, that spot is okay. And here's what you need to do.
Well, how they replace it is okay. In other words, make sure that the width is preserved.
Width is
So-
preserved, the height is honored, the type of arm that they're planning to use. They couldn't put it at the back and have the
Right.
ball dropping like right on the sidewalk,
Okay,
I don't think.
if we say with a
I get it.
permit system, Public Works will draft what the permit requires. So we don't have to get involved in all the details of that
I
permit.
just said that they need
Yeah.
to agree, though.
Per permitted standards. because
Per- yes.
And they're going to put permit requirements together.
Okay, that's,
Which one's your committee?
I don't want to talk about the ones in the street. I don't want to,
Well, it doesn't sound like we need
Most
to
do.
because it's already in the ordinance. So all we
Okay.
have to do is talk about putting something permanent in the sidewalk,
Yeah.
maintaining the 5-foot width
so,
as permit and then following the permit standards.
If I may, Mr. Chair, maintain the existing sidewalk width. There may be some areas that have a 6-foot sidewalk, so you might not want to say 5 feet. Okay? There's a possibility.
Just let it go.
There could be a 6-foot sidewalk. It's rare, but I don't want to discount that. That's,
So, Mr. Chair, if we took the street part out of Pat's motion, her motion was, she moved to support allowing homeowners to install a basketball hoop mounted in the sidewalk, subject to guidance and permits from the Public Works Department. That doesn't say anything about a certain sidewalk width. It would be pretty much up to.
We'd let them
it would
do
be
the
up
work.
to
We also
them.
need to
Yes.
say behind the sidewalk. In the sidewalk or behind
I
it,
think I said in or behind, but
In or
yeah.
behind?
Yes.
That part. And we don't have a second.
That's private property.
We'll be discussing.
Oh, okay. Well, we're
I
trying,
second.
But isn't that, do we have to talk about the behind if it's on private
Yes.
property?
yes.
Bill?
behind the sidewalk on numerous streets, there's a 1.5 foot of space before it's private property.
Okay.
Now, and I had this discussion with the city manager. He said at the property line, well, in some places in Kaiser, the property line is 10 or 12 or 13 feet behind the sidewalk. So, behind the sidewalk is the language. No reference property line, no reference right of way,
But-
behind the sidewalk.
Inner,
So,
yeah, inner behind.
could you read it again, please?
Move to support allowing homeowners to install basketball hoop mounted or in or behind sidewalk, subject to guidance and permit from the Public Works Department.
Now, and it's been seconded.
A second.
That was Hirsch and,
Okay.
Okay, now, any problem? Does that sound okay to you guys who have to do it?
Or planters. If there's a landscape strip, I heard that that's fine
Yeah.
as well.
Oh, that's true. So,
Just not the stormwater.
yeah, but we're talking about, we need to put that in.
Okay, so then it would be like this. Move to support allowing homeowners to install a basketball hoop mounted in or behind sidewalk or in planter strip, subject to guidance and permit from the Public Works
So can we,
Department.
how do we make
I would, do I have to accept a friendly amendment or something?
Yeah, and then I will second.
A work in progress.
Okay,
Yeah.
so I'll accept the amendment to add the language of,
You're okay with it?
And
or in the landscape strip.
And I will second that amendment.
Can I ask one question that maybe I'm missing something here, but, so Bill, you said that some sidewalks are 6 feet, so you have to maintain the 6 foot. So doesn't that always mean then they're always gonna have to be putting it outside of the sidewalk? Because if it's a 5-foot sidewalk,
No, if they want to put it in the sidewalk, drill a hole in the sidewalk, you have to widen the sidewalk to maintain that way. The other option is to put it behind the sidewalk.
right? Because but if you're adding to the sidewalk, then that's on the outside of the pole now, so.
Towards the yard, no, towards the yard.
Oh, towards the yard.
Towards the yard.
Okay, I'm thinking the other way. Okay, gotcha, all right, gotcha.
I kind of think this is settled, but I do have one question, but I don't want it to cloud what we just did. There's major confusion, because I live on a new street with a new stormwater. That neighbors are thinking that's their planter strip.
Well, I would think that'd be a permit.
And we do have a basketball hoop mounted there.
Mr. Thompson and I were just talking about that. As part of the permitting process to allow these, Public Works staff will determine whether they can or they cannot place it in that stormwater soil area. We have some of those facilities built with filter fabric with drain rock enclosed inside that filter fabric. We can't just have that fabric disturbed. Probably not going to allow one there. We have other areas where there's no fabric, and so, you know, if they drill a hole, pour concrete, it may not be an impact to the stormwater system.
So they
We'll have to evaluate that on a case-by-case basis, which we would do through the permitting process.
So the permit process will take
Guidance and
care of
permit
that.
would cover
Exactly.
that.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, so we have a
Motion,
motion and a
is a
second
second.
for the amended motion.
a recommendation to the city
Recommendation
council.
to the city council. So all in favor, or do we have any more discussion before? Okay. So all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? No opposed and no abstentions? So the motion passes. Okay, Thank you, Jonathan and Bill. So, we have, and I don't know if it's a moot point now, Debbie, now that it's. Oh, I can get it. Okay, so we were going to just move some things around on the agenda, bumping up the ADA ramps and added crosswalks mid-block to the next agenda item. So I will move down, and we may all want to move down so we can see the screen.
Oh,
You can just use the arrows to go up and down. There's no mouse.
So we're going to start off by saying that Pat and I have talked a little bit offline about these locations. She sent me a list of locations. I took generally her list and added some additional ones. So right now there are two maps. One that was printed off of a plat map that was based solely on Pat's recommendations. And then, as you can see on the screen, I did something in Google Earth, just adding a whole bunch of pinpoints. So, now, Debbie, I can't bring hers up on that, right?
No, I didn't know you want to.
Yeah, okay, that's okay. So let's talk about Pat's first, since that was the.
You'll have that in front of you.
Yeah. So we have, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, with a option for one of them of 2 different locations. And the area extends from just north, well, Plymouth Drive, which is just coming into town, so at the south end of town, all the way up to just south of Lock Haven. Pat, could you talk about your reasoning for these locations?
Well, I could talk about the reasoning for each individual one, but I guess I'd like to back up a little bit first
Sure.
and say that I think the reason it's important for us to talk about this again tonight is that the city council.
No, that's okay. The others are automatically on. This one, you push button, but let me just do this. There. Oh, sorry, I don't want you to. Okay.
The reason I think it's important for our committee to talk about this tonight is because the city council is considering the approval of the River Road Revitalization Plan on Monday. And I think I would not be able to attend that meeting, but I think it would be important for us to send 1 or 2 of our committee members to testify at the city council meeting about the revitalization plan and the fact that the idea of pedestrian crossings is barely touched on in that plan, and yet it's so integral to how the future conditions up and down River Road would function in the future, whether it's for mixed-use development, different types of commercial development, and so forth. If as the plan says, they want to not have conflicts between the different modes of travel, and they want people to be able to access these activity areas, these crossings are going to be very important. So that's why this committee knows I was already interested in this issue, but now I think it's very timely as they look at it in the plan, because if we don't have better recognition of this in the revitalization plan, then it may not translate to the transportation system plan and translate into pursuing future investment to actually get some of the enhanced crossings built. So that's kind of the lead up.
Pat, can I just interrupt you briefly?
Sure.
Nate can't be here all night long. I know
Okay.
he wants to be, but he does have some input that
Okay.
is good base information.
So we have been talking about this issue. Your letter is in the packet. Well, it actually didn't make it into the packet, but it will be as part of the record. And so all of the discussion that you have had is part of the record, and that is being incorporated as part of that record. I did send the information to our consultants because there was, at the Planning Commission, there was some discussion about what the motion should be and whether this should be included in that motion. It was, I was not there, but I did look at I did watch the meeting. And it was decided kind of on the fly that it should go through this process, through the TSP, et cetera, et cetera. But the testimony was so compelling that we have evaluated that, and we have had long conversations with our consultants, our traffic engineer consultant that's part of that group. For example, I shared your letter with her, and today she responded with, I haven't looked at these specific sites on Google, but I can tell they've been well thought about and they're very astutely referred to. They've very, if I could read, it'd be helpful. They've very astutely referred to access management needs for consolidation or specific turn restrictions. She points out that the city has a challenge in that it does not have a permit access permit process. And so that would be one of the things. One of the important things I think everybody needs to understand about what the Kaiser Revitalization Plan is, it is an overarching guiding document. That is a plan that specifically creates the structure by which things will be addressed. There are some specific things that do get established in the plan. We create the district boundaries, we create the nodes within the boundaries. But, so, and Pat, you're absolutely right. As it was developed, and as the plan was developed, there was reference there to addressing pedestrian safety. But there was not the specific issue of what you have brought up of these crossing and the need for additional crossing. And so I just wanted you to know that as we have written the staff report and in the packet for council, basically the final recommendation is that the council open the public hearing to consider the proposed adoption of the Kaiser Revitalization Plan, comprehensive plan map changes, zoning map changes, and Kaiser Development Code amendments. Deliberate and direct staff to prepare an ordinance with findings to adopt the proposed revisions. Now, that was given as a result of what the Planning Commission recommendation was. But importantly, what I have added is council may choose to adopt the report and to direct an evaluation of the corridor to identify feasible locations for enhanced pedestrian crossings on River Road. That was coupled with the paragraph ahead in dealing with pedestrian safety. Public testimony has been received regarding the provision and installation of mid-block crossings. The plan generally addresses the need to improve corridor safety, including pedestrian safety. The plan does not specifically call out mid-block crossing or locations, but does call for a safety audit to be performed. The council may direct an evaluation of the corridor to identify feasible locations for enhanced pedestrian crossings on River Road. An engineering study would be necessary to determine if a crossing is warranted and what types of treatments are suitable. This could be done within the context of a roadway conceptual design plan or as its own effort at a specific location or for the entire corridor. What we're trying to get at here is just as though we would not write in the comprehensive plan the specificity of a location.
No.
We would not write in the Kaiser Development Code specific locations. Those are governed by the Transportation System Plan. And to get stuff into the Transportation System Plan, you've got to go through the evaluation process. So what we're asking council to do is to direct that process be engaged. So,
I appreciate that, because I certainly do not think that this map that was generated from me, riding my bike and stopping every so often along River Road, it belongs in the adopted document. But I'm glad that you have accepted that it belongs in the discussion for the next step, for the recognition of the issue and the next steps.
So sorry to
And
take your time.
I want to ask you too, and maybe Bill Lawyer as well, whether we want to say mid-block crossings. They're out of the ones that I identified, and I'm not sure with the ones that Michael identified, whether any are, a couple of the ones I did are mid-block. They're not at a side street.
Right.
But most of the ones identified really are serving the side streets, even though it's only because the side streets are offset that they're not at the actual corners. But
Yeah, that's-
I don't,
So-
I cringe a little bit at
Sure.
calling them mid-block crossings.
So did we,
Okay.
actually. And that's why we include mid-block crossing, the term there.
Yeah.
But the specific is to conduct a safety audit to determine appropriate pedestrian enhancements.
Enhanced crossings.
So,
Okay. Yeah.
with street crossing, yeah. I
The
better,
the Churchdale is probably the best one, which is really curb to curb from the McDonald's side over to Churchdale. And that's well used.
yeah. And so you are going to be, this committee is going to be actively engaged in that whole process.
Okay, good.
But we're not going to take your list and fold it into because it's outside of the context of what this plan establishes.
No, I'm perfectly fine with that. I just wanted to have it as examples of, this is the sort of the magnitude of the problem, there's,
Well, and you guys know better than anybody that to do these things is going to require some sacrifices and some funding sources and some political process that will be fraught with all kinds of discussion.
and I guess one thing too is I've had, I think 2 different people comment back to me that this would be an impediment to emergency response vehicles, and I don't
had
believe
3
that.
people talk to
I don't
me.
believe that. An island that's 20 or 30 feet long, I'm sure that our drivers are better than that. They've got 2 full lanes on either side to move around.
Yes, so you're well aware of what the discussion that has to happen.
Okay.
The last thing that I want to have happen is that the entire year-and-a-half process gets ground to a halt because we want to identify locations, which is not part of that process.
Nate?
Just important.
When you use the term enhanced crossings, that's everything from a marked, painted crosswalk to a stoplight.
Well,
Is all of, or islands and all sorts of things, right?
in the testimony that I wrote to council, it describes that the traffic volume on River Road is over 25,000 per day on average. And when I met with the traffic engineer at ODOT, he said, when you're up in that range, for it to function safely, you really should have the refuge island and the rapid flashing beacon, which is like what you see down by the Salem Amtrak station.
Yeah.
And if you go down there and watch, you will see how well it works, how the cars stop.
But
And
enhanced
now
is
they're-
a broad category.
Yes, David, and that's why at this level of establishing the plan, we want those broad terms to
Yes.
say, you will do an audit. We are committed, the city takes the responsibility to doing that audit, and we'll address that through the appropriate processes. That's really, I think, the win here, is to get that commitment on the part of the city.
And I think the specifics of the design, we know what kind of the state of the art is currently, but it could change by a few years. They could have something new.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Nate.
Sorry.
Thank you.
I didn't mean to commandeer your meeting, but I am shepherding this thing.
Oh, we always enjoy seeing you.
I think that's good to have, and I should have done a little more of a intro going into it before I threw it over to Pat. But
Feel free to come any Thursday night. If you haven't got anything else to do, you know.
But I do think that tonight we can have at least a brief show and tell and a little discussion of why, of some of the locations, why.
If you want me to describe those now for the?
Yeah, and,
what's- is
again,
this-
I don't think you have to go through detail on every one, but your thought process as you were,
And these are yours up here?
those are mine, yeah.
Okay.
And I will talk about mine briefly
ones?
as well.
Okay.
Which ones do you want to do first?
We're gonna do Pat's first,
Okay.
so the map that we have.
So I started at Lock Haven and worked my way south, and I looked I've kind of just positioned myself roughly halfway in between the signals and started looking around for where was there a cross street, where was there a likely density of people either that would be trying to go somewhere or trying to arrive somewhere. Was there a bus stop? Was there apartments? Was there a popular store or something? So that's kind of what I looked for. And in the list that you have, you see kind of my first thoughts of where a crossing could touch on the west side and the east side, with kind of some wiggle room in there. And then after I visited with the traffic engineer, and we looked at each spot on the map and the street view, and that's how we kind of fine-tuned the one that's stated as the recommendation. So it kind of worked and said, oh, okay, obviously some, or if not all of these, would need field check, but from what we could tell from the map, he advised on whether it would be better north side of the street or a little bit south. And the other thing that I was looking at as I worked my way down the street and in discussion with Gary was trying to make sure that you could still do left turn in and left turn out. In other words, that's why they're not exactly at the intersection corners, but maybe offset by 1 or 2 car lengths so that somebody could pull out of a side street, have a spot in the center lane, and then continue the second stage of their turn.
Did you take into account bus stops?
We did on some of them. I probably didn't catch all of them.
No, I just,
Yeah, I think
there's
that's
places
very
I've never seen
important.
the bus stop, and there's places it always stops, so
Yeah.
it seems to be, at least when I'm behind it.
Well, certainly,
Thank you.
more bus stops are more or some bus stops are more popular, and that may be something that the bus agency can inform us on too.
And I guess the last factor that we looked at kind of was, did some of these properties did they only have one driveway? Or did they have
I saw
more than
that,
one?
yeah.
So was there opportunity to place something where maybe one of their driveways becomes right in or right out only, and they had another one that could serve the opposite direction of traffic? So we looked at that a little bit. Obviously, it would have to be field checked and all kinds of negotiations once you get further along in the process and got into actually proposing a site.
Okay, well, and so, thank you, Pat. And mine is up there. I'm gonna make it a little bit smaller just so you can see a little bit more. I very similar thought process going into it. I will say I think Pat put more thought than I did into it, but I was definitely focusing on bus stops or apartment complexes or known, busy cross sections. Certainly avoiding places where there are traffic lights already, because it's already a signalized crossing. My area of interest was broader. I started from the same spot at the bottom of town, but I worked a little bit on Cherry, because Cherry, while not as broad of a street, can get pretty busy. And for those of you who know, the business offices down there. There are people who try to cross, and you've got people turning onto Cherry from the Parkway, so they're not necessarily paying attention to pedestrians. And I also moved up towards past Lock Haven. As you probably all know, people driving on River Road going north, they feel like it's time to achieve escape velocity on that road because it's faster, wider, and they're almost home. So I thought having a few crossings there, especially near the apartments that are on both sides, but mostly, I think they're mostly on the east side of River Road.
What's on the east side?
Apartment complexes. You can see them right in through here.
There's a bunch on,
Yeah, I didn't look at Wheatland. I don't know if that's even something. I mean,
I live on Wheeler.
there's plenty of traffic over there. So.
I've never had to wait more than 20 seconds.
Yeah,
across
I think
Wheatland.
it's certain times of day it's busy, and then the rest of the day.
Well,
it's-
it's because of the way that the signals work so well that you get clumps of cars and then you get
nothing. Yeah.
I would mention though that your River Road, the speed limit is 40 once you leave Lock Haven, it's 40 from there?
Yeah.
It's
yeah.
40 from Lock Haven north.
Right.
To Perkins, and then Perkins, it's
Yeah, if the
55.
Perkins on, it goes to
Yeah.
55. But, you know, I walk, and I live up there, and I walk down by the parks down there. I don't think I've ever seen more than, like this summer, 10 people total
Walking.
on River Road.
Well, it's not.
Well, no, there's sidewalks. and there's
Yeah, but you feel exposed walking, especially on that part of River.
Well, I was thinking in the park, you've got one by a park, and there's another park on the other side of the road that people more apt to go to, so.
I will tell you that, you know, when we're, oops, sorry about that.
Yeah, that area.
So I live in the Gupser neighborhood. You're able to cross the creek up here
Yep.
and get through. And I've tried to go cross River Road over here by bike to get to parks and to see people up in here, and
Well,
it ain't
crossing
easy.
River Road's difficult.
Yeah. Well, but at least down further south, you have some signals to try and get to.
On the north part of River Road, I support ideas, but the south part of River Road, Chamawa to the city limits, south, is, no matter what we do, is not good for cycling. It never will be. It's just not good.
River Road, yeah.
The River Road portion. And for pedestrians, we're getting some better sidewalks, but that crossing, and if we want, as mentioned in the future, more housing density, more of this, we're going to have some crossings. And I really appreciate Nate explaining things that one step at a time, but we're going to get it in. You know, if we only have $5 to do stuff, the south section would be where I would want the improvements for pedestrians, because that's a big pair, you know,
No, I agree with you.
you know, I just lived in Kaiser all my life, so I know we always don't get the full money. We only get $5. Well, what do we do with it? The south portion. And some of the ones that both you and Pat picked out, perfectly logical. Because we've seen people go across River Road there walking, so. And that section is where we've had our serious injuries, deaths.
Yeah, I agree. Pat, did you have any more information as to cost of these?
I think that does get in a much future phase of the discussion, but I think the rapid flash beacon with a small refuge, I think that was running like $80,000-$90,000, something like that. So that includes the island, it includes the signs with the flashers on both sides and in the middle.
Well, obviously, the devil will be in the details of the audit, and then focusing where we try to get the most bang for the buck.
I mean, in a multi-million-dollar project like what would be done on River Road, that would just be one component of it.
Right.
We did get an email from Mike Jaffe about after he testified at the Planning Commission, and said that a mid-block pedestrian safety crossing of a 5-lane arterial, including a median with a raised island and the signals, costs in a range of $220,000 to $240,000. Salem received a grant for a 3-lane arterial, and the budget for that project is $175,000.
Okay, low.
So, yeah, so
And is
they're
that-
not cheap, but
That would be
another
designed
thing
to build, right?
Pardon?
That would be designed to christening it, right?
I suppose,
The whole stage.
yeah.
Yeah.
Designed to installation.
Yeah. I think, the number Pat said seems a little more, I know Mike's got experience in them, but Pat's numbers seem like numbers I've heard before too.
Okay. Another thing that I wanted to bring up is the information we got from Doug Bish after he was here about the statistics that ODOT has on accidents and fatalities. And the map that he sent of the fatalities and serious injuries on River Road, just in I think the last 4 years, I think it was 2014 to 2017, 19 fatalities, or serious injuries or fatalities, and I think 2 of those were fatalities. And 4 of the serious injuries were north of Lock Haven. So, and I agree that that's a barren stretch there. A long way if you want to cross that street
Yeah, but where would
before you
you
can
be
do it
going?
safely.
Well,
But those weren't all
Wayne's
pedestrian
house.
Well,
accidents, but
that's true, we could be going to Wayne's house.
yeah. Exactly.
Didn't think of that.
Well, so I don't know if we want to, belabor it tonight.
Thank you.
About this. We've talked
Professional.
about the idea and the need. We've also talked about how the River Road project it's a goal for that project, not a specific location. So I'll be sharing my map again with Debbie so she can share it with all of you.
Thank you.
And you can feel free to red mark it up as much as you want.
Do we
Okay.
need to, based on what Mr. Brown said, then do we need to appear at the council meeting, or do you think that it's incorporated? Or maybe Councilor Kohler, you can advise.
I think it's up to you.
Oh,
I would think he incorporated your email, so that would probably be from you personally, but if we
Yeah.
wanted to endorse that or support it, we could,
It never hurts, but it's, if by some chance we can't, I still feel confident these concepts are going to move forward.
Yes.
We can also request our council liaison, that's part of our liaison's job, is to pass on the committee's thoughts to council at the next meeting.
That'd be scary, wouldn't it?
I trust you.
Just want to remind you, Nate read his recommendation to council to staff.
Yeah.
Yeah,
okay.
So-
That's what he read, that's his recommendation to council. So-
Yeah.
Okay.
it really covers the points that we wanted, but it never hurts to have any committee come in to council and do their committee report.
I'm going to be there anyway on behalf of the West Kaiser Neighborhood Association, so if you want me to just put in a plug for Nate's recommendation, I can do that on behalf of the committee if we
Yes,
agree.
thank you.
Yeah.
Okay,
I think that's a,
okay.
Okay, so moving on.
bike lane.
Yes, the bike lane at Kaiser Elementary.
Well,
Could I ask one other question?
Yes.
Officer Lede, do we know of any statistics for pedestrian injuries along River Road or deaths?
Well, those were not necessarily pedestrian, they were car
Traffic.
fatalities or injuries, yeah. So.
So what I will say is, I'm our local collision reconstructionist. Have been doing it for about 25 years, both in Kaiser and outside of Kaiser. Most of the fatals that I've responded to within Kaiser have not been incidences outside of crosswalks and things like that. Actually, most of ours have actually been within electronic controlled crosswalk areas. Some have been DUI alcohol related, others not. Failed to obey traffic control devices. So as far as outside the scope of that, my personal opinion, as far as just off the top of my head without going into a data study again, would be really it's not outside of our crosswalks where we have our issues. We just have the inattentive driver in the crosswalks.
Thank you very much.
And I would say, I think the goal of our committee is to create a safe environment. So even if there's not collisions that result in injury or death, we do see people trying to cross River Road in an unsafe fashion. And it's only, I guess, by sheer luck that we haven't.
and we do know, and we do have documentation of one death between Sunset and Orchid with a little boy that followed his mom across the street.
And if I may respond to that one also, they were extremely close to an electronic control crosswalk, and unfortunately, it was chosen not to utilize it at the time. Some of those things that, if I may caution the committee in some ways, is we do not want to give pedestrians a false sense of security. And our electronic control devices in our intersections are probably some of our most secure that we can possibly have, because that's the most understandable crossing as a driver that we know of.
Do you remember how far away from that signalized crossing that was?
Off the top of my head, I'd probably say less than 200 feet.
That's probably about right, because there's a cross there.
Mark,
A memorial
yeah.
about where he, yeah.
Okay. Moving along to the bike lane at Kaiser Elementary.
In bike lane at Kaiser Elementary, Pat and I haven't met, but school just started last week, and kindergarten just started yesterday. I was kind of informed by my insider, don't go over there, Dad, and start taking pictures on the outside without getting a permission from the principal. So I haven't followed up with the principal. I have an email, but she hasn't gotten back to me. However, I did walk over there yesterday and just kind of watch. And yeah, there are bikes, there are cars parked. Not so much in the morning. They're pretty quick and gone, but cars in the afternoon for pickup. Yeah, there's a significant number. And I counted up to 15 cars. The average time that they were parked was less than 5 minutes. A couple were there for 10. I know from the police standpoint, it's an enforcement impossibility. That bike lane there.
Why is it there?
Well, it was put there because it was part of a bigger project when they put Lock Haven in. When Kaiser my kids were the first to that new Kaiser Elementary. Inland Shores was not there. The gate to McNary wasn't there. It was just put in there, part of the Lock Haven project, which was supposed to be eventually a bridge across the Willamette. We won't go there. And so it's kind of a bike lane to nowhere. And the other thing that I observed, which I had perceived before, is most of the kids with bikes come across with the crossing guard and are on the sidewalk. And that is a wide sidewalk.
I know that I like bike lanes. Sometimes I don't like them. I'm wondering sometimes, is there a reason we keep a bike lane?
Well, that's my question, is
Do we need it there? What do you think?
That's a question that we were going to address after we talked to the principal, I think.
well, I want to talk to the principal, but from a cycling advocate standpoint, this one, even with the cars parked there during that time, a cyclist can access back into McNary if they wanted to, or into Inland Shores. Kids' safety, oh, thank God they have a nice crosswalk there, and it's one that's, you know, school zone, and they have the guard, and the kids are, even on bikes, are using the sidewalk. And what we're doing is, we have a law that you can't park unless you're in an emergency vehicle. There's other situations where you can park, but really this doesn't fit. We're making all these parents violators.
Is there anyone?
And I don't think we need it there, to be honest. Just be.
Hirsch, if I may address that.
Yeah.
So we have violations that are enforced with discretion. It's kind of like your posted speed limits. If you're going 26 and a 25, legally you're violating the posted limit.
Yeah.
Do we choose to go out and enforce that? I think we use a little better discretion. And I think trying to remove a crosswalk that's only being, or a bike lane that's only being utilized, you know, or I should say not being utilized maybe an hour, 5 days a week, and only 8 months out of the year, it has the access to be utilized most of the time. So you're talking, you know, 2% of the time of it not being usable. That's the discretion that's being involved with it. So I wouldn't necessarily say you need to remove that.
But I'm wondering what happens if you didn't paint it for whatever years in a row and it disappeared. I mean, do we have, I guess, well, look, we have a director of public works. Do we have, do we have bike lanes in all similar situations? Make a run, Bill.
Probably not on that level.
Or is it a
No, we
unique
do
bike
not.
lane?
We do not. I don't know the history why that bike lane showed up, honestly. I think that happened before we were a city or as
Well,
part
it
of
was,
the.
this was well before the city.
So there may be, emphasis on may, be a requirement that there be a bike lane on McClure Street from a land use standpoint. I simply don't know. It is unique in the city, no question about it.
It is very unique
It
with the
is.
school district as far as schools too.
I was sitting there listening to the conversation, and it occurred to me, there may be something in a land use decision for the creation of the school that required it. I don't know.
So the city attorney would have, if he didn't have anything else to do, he could look into that.
Somebody look at the planning document?
Okay, I'll let you know how that works out.
Well,
You know, honestly, in all seriousness, that's something that Nate's staff would look into more than Shannon, okay? And that's not an easy task to dig into those records from the county before we were a city, I'll tell you. We've had to do this before, and while it's possible, it's a challenge. And some of the records we just don't have. The county will tell us, oh, we gave those all to Kaiser. Well, how come Kaiser can't find them? So there may not be an opportunity to find an answer to my question, okay? We can look into it and see.
Okay.
And then to somebody's comment, what happens if we don't paint them? If we don't paint them over time, they're gonna go away. I mean, that's just the reality of it.
Would that
On that
leave-
street, it's gonna take a while.
Yeah,
Because of the volume.
would actually physically going in and burning them off, that would create the street, that could create a traffic, speeding problem more likely. though.
Potentially, it's gonna feel wider, and cars are gonna go faster, absolutely. I mean,
well,
but personally, I kind of agree with Sergeant Lede over there that, you know, maybe the better part of valor here is just leave it alone. It's a problem, it's a
think you're
localized
right.
problem that happens 20 minutes a day that affects the school and the kids going to the school when they're coming out of school, getting in their cars with their parents or picking them up and going home. So is it really a problem?
I don't,
Sure, it's
I
against
really
the law,
don't think it is.
obviously, we know
but-
that.
Well,
You
the
know.
route is clearly not a major cycling route
Right.
for commuting, scenic bikeway, whatever. Fact is, a number of years ago, I was not cited, but a phone call came into the Kaiser Police on a Thursday night that I had a bike parade go through McNary Estates and out. It's because we had had so many flats, it was getting late, so we took the shortcut. So technically, riding on a private street to get there is not, it's not a bike route
It's
there.
frowned upon, is it? It's frowned upon, is it?
Frowned upon.
Well, at the time, I guess I had a bike parade,
McNary
four of us, a bunch of guys in Lycra, I guess, looked kind of weird, but
Well, I'm kind of I'm not a law and order specialist or advocate. Well, yes, I am. I don't like rules that you let people break in terms of then it's up to them to decide when they get to break that rule. And I understand your position. I also kind of think that it
I think that part of the
shouldn't
thing.
be there.
Yeah, we can talk with the principal and see, and look for some other options. Maybe we can encourage some of the parents that don't really have to be there to not be there.
I have not, as I mentioned, I
Yeah.
haven't talked to this principal. This is the first week,
Oh,
Yeah.
well, yeah.
and they're busy. So it might take a couple, 3 weeks before we can get an appointment in, and she can see the picture.
Okay.
So I say, yeah, we'll table
Let
it
it
until
go.
further discussion.
Continue. Yep.
And by next meeting, do you think that's
I hope
appropriate?
so, but it's up to the principal to,
7:30.
but
Well, I
yeah.
suppose could we, within 2 weeks, know?
If I may make one comment to you, Hirsch, on addressing that issue. It has been addressed, I've been here for
Numerous
almost 27 years now. It has been addressed more times than I can count. And it's a cyclic problem. It's not a specific problem. What I mean by that is we have a cycle of kids and parents that continue to go through the school. And there's no way to educate one group at one time. So it just continues to cycle and cycle.
Well, in the first group that did it was my kids and me. So, but it would be nice to especially meet with the principal, talk to her about this little issue, also promoting other cycling and safety things that we might be able to provide that school.
Okay.
We can do that.
Yeah.
All right, so let's move on to speed limits on city arterials. Thank you, Bill. Have a good evening. So last meeting, was it? Time flies. We had Doug Bish from ODOT who gave us a briefing on ODOT and the state's efforts towards giving cities a little more control over their speed limits. Portland has it from a legislation that passed 2 years ago.
Yeah, 2017.
But that was Portland specific, and so the next move is to allow other cities the same discretion, and that would be between the speed limits of 25 and 45, if I'm correct?
I think it's 25 and 55, I think.
Is it 50? Okay. So clearly, the highest speeds are on the arterials. River Road is 35 miles an hour, which
Except
a lot
on
of
the
people,
very
that's a
fourth.
suggestion, not a speed limit.
mid-hill. So as soon as you get
Right.
to about the 5600 block, I want to say.
Wait, when you get to Wayne's house,
Wayne's house, yeah.
then you can take off.
Then you could speed up, yeah. So the legislation didn't move forward in this current, or this past legislative session. I don't remember, do you remember if he said they were gonna put it up again in the next legislative?
Yeah, and I think they're still working on rules. They're still planning on coming out with some, what they can do with amending the rules.
Yeah.
Without legislation.
So it was my thought that we could have a recommendation to council to one, have a city endorsement of this legislation. I know cities are allowed to do amicus curiae or something like that. No?
Political.
Well, I don't know if you were on the committee back when it happened, but I know Hirsch was, that we sent them a recommendation and they kind of just slapped it down. They have actually a policy where they don't get involved in state legislature most of the time. I know there's some nuances there that I am not familiar with, but I'd hate for y'all to get your feelings hurt again.
Right,
Because
so I
it really,
I
I
do
could tell it hurt your
remember-
feelings last time.
Fairly recently, they decided not to do something like that.
Would it be more like we need to just keep monitoring it and seeing what passes and then determine if there's any areas that Kaiser wants to
Then we can make.
post
Yeah,
differently
that-
than what they are now?
That's
Because
kind of
the-
what I was thinking, is let's see how this administrative rule rolls out. And it'll be out for public comment, and we can see.
And we can all have the
something.
citizens' right to show up at public
Yeah.
comment.
Right,
Yeah.
and if there's something we think the city should be aware of, we could just point it out to them.
Yes.
The mayor at the time when Debbie was talking about the issue this committee brought, the explanation was if it's very, very Kaiser specific, yes. But if it's like for the whole state, which this really is for the whole state, no, we'll let the legislative process and feedback through the citizens to the representative, our elected representatives would work. But once it got, like you're suggesting, once it's done, let's see how this will apply to Kaiser. This committee could work on it.
Okay.
Okay,
So,
we'll wait and see.
okay, so I guess that's that. We'll wait and see on how the legislation passes or not, and how the rules are written, and then we can make recommendations on locations. All right. That looks like brings us to number 8, the project reports. Pat, do you have anything for Parkway path signage?
I don't have anything new on the Parkway Path signage. I was kind of working on this other River Road thing instead. And as far as the trash receptacles, I didn't bring it up earlier in the discussion with the bicycle hoops, but I've kind of got my eye on what happens with that. In speaking with Nate Brown's staff earlier today, I did kind of ask about that, if they had incorporated the garbage cans, which also people put in an obstruction in the sidewalk. And he said that had kind of been an intention to address that, but it wasn't addressed in this issue that's addressing the basketball hoops. It's a little bit different, it's a different part of the code, so I think I'll work on that separately and see exactly what's the best way to approach that. The one thing I found out is that something I didn't know before was that the current rule is that the garbage cans are allowed to be in the sidewalk 24 hours before and up through 24 hours after their scheduled pickup time. So I thought so my thought is that maybe for the future, maybe come up with some wording for next month in this committee and say, maybe we want to encourage people to, I don't know, change that a little bit. Councilman.
Thank you. My research on that showed that the garbage cans are in the contract with the trash companies, not in the code.
And I've been told that too.
I've been kind of monitoring one section that I ride quite often, and that's Chemawa Road to Shoreline. And that has been, at least in the past, garbage cans, trash bins being put, and actually forcing me as a cyclist to go out around and stuff. I've seen tremendous improvement, and maybe it's just the garbage companies getting, Lawrence is pretty good. Tremendous improvement, and they're putting them back towards the curb, so I really do have plenty of room.
And that's one of the most difficult scenarios, with the rain
Storm.
garden scenarios, where people have the least options there.
Yeah,
where they can
but
place
if they get it back as far as they can with the curb, and it seems, maybe when they pick it up, they're moving it back or whatever, but it seems to be, at least in the last few months, an improvement.
Well, I do agree with Pat that the time allowed seems a little longer than necessary. I think that's what neighbors are for if you're not going to be home.
Oh, really? Okay.
Okay.
Okay, Wayne's not here, so we'll move on to Kathy.
He's on doing Cycle Oregon, by the way.
Oh, good for Wayne.
Hope they're not getting rain. I don't have anything to report. Oh, and I think Hirsch probably knows more about the bikes repair station than I do, so I'll let him fill you in on that.
Okay.
Okay, so for the other one was NACDO, and similar to Pat, I was working more on the crossings, and now I'm no longer on the planning commission, so I have another night of the month I can do stuff.
Oh.
Okay, Hirsch?
Well, on the bike repair station, the station at the transit center downtown was removed because it was being vandalized and it was parts were broken and stuff. They've repaired it. They have all the tools, and it's in their storage. And I talked with both Roxanne and Misha O'Reilly to hold it for us here in Kaiser. Because we'll find a place for it. The place that we're looking at, not just me, is at Kennedy Elementary and with the Boys and Girls Club. I haven't been able to talk with the Boys and Girls Club, Sue Bloom, or the principal just yet, but that's the first thoughtful place we thought of. If that one doesn't pan out, I know the committee has talked about at Kaiser Rapids. There may be other places, but it's in their warehouse and that has a Kaiser sticker on it.
Excellent.
Are there any potential business locations that might be open to that?
It would be somewhat difficult since that was bought with public funds to be put in a private business. There's issues with that. That's why we got the one here with no problems. They could give us the money there. So that's why having it at Kennedy and stuff wouldn't be a problem. And it is in a, and this is a segue for Kennedy, is that the Safe Routes to School position within the school district being funded by the Council of Governments is moving ahead. I met with Mike Jaffe yesterday, and he's writing position descriptions and things right now and going through the necessary steps, thinking possibly at the end of the year might have something going. But one of the schools that's on the list for Salem Kaiser would be Kennedy right at this moment. So all this kind of may tie into each other. If we can get that there, they had such a successful little bike scoot event this last year, and they got the Boys and Girls Club there. It might be in it. They are a Title I school.
And if we ever successful getting the Parkway Path signing, that would be a good thing to have there too, at the Kaiser Avenue.
Kaiser Road.
Kaiser Road.
Access to the path, it could say bike repair station 2 blocks or whatever.
Exactly,
you know.
but with a nonprofit in the school district, have to kind of work with. But luckily, both Kathy and I have met Michael Shields, the the cabinet level person that does the kind of the public works for them, and he's very positive about stuff. So it's just, but our name's on it. If that doesn't work out, we still can find another place for it. And I know Mike will put it up beautifully.
All right. Did you have anything else about the bike-friendly business or McNary upgrade?
McNary upgrade, I talked directly with Eric Jesperson via email, and he said, it's on the docket, Persh, hang on. I want to wait till the most of the building project's going, and then we'll get right on it. So he
On
didn't
the
give me
pipeline.
he said there's still a lot of building going on. And he said once that kind of settles, but he said, yes, it is on the docket.
All right.
So
Good. Thank you.
I thought it was important to kind of be a nag, I guess.
Sure. Okay. Is there any committee member input?
Yes.
Dave?
The Kaiser Fire District's having their Fire Prevention Week open house October 7th from 6:30 to 8:30. We normally show up to provide helmets and information. And I can tell you, okay, we did the Lakeside Church
On the August 25th.
Surf
You
Fest.
did.
My daughter and my granddaughter helped. And Joe came over before he moved. Anyway, we took an hour and 40 minutes to fit 60 kids with helmets. And next year, she's going to go for 100 helmets. She's going to try.
Yeah.
So, but we haven't got the check yet, but it's in the mail. Somewhere.
I'll find out where.
Okay, so anyway, on the October 7th one, that's a Monday night. I have the helmets. I have enough helmets. We've ordered helmets, but we have enough helmets. And I
got
need
it.
some more. Where do we need to get the booklets?
You get them through ODOT, Heidi.
Do you have a bunch, or do
I
I?
have a ton now.
Okay, well, I'll
I'll just
use
bring-
yours. So I need some people to help. A couple of you anyway.
Mary Ann and I for sure.
Okay.
And just a quick plug for Kaiser Public Works, that same night as the fire department is also Kaiser Public Works open house, so come and check us
Free
out.
donuts? What do we get? Milkshakes, sundaes, donuts?
Bubbling water.
Any other committee member input? All right. Staff report. Mike.
All right, thank you. So the River Road paving project is just about wrapping up. There's a few sheet plates left on just north of Shamawa, and they should be removed tomorrow. And the contract, because the contractor will be paving those up. So those took some concrete that had to set for 2 days, unlike some of the other areas. So it'll be good to get those off the road. Next week, they have a few punch list items. They have a couple gas valves that need to raise, a couple water valves that need to be looked at. Catch basin inserts removed. So pretty much by the end of next week, hopefully those candlesticks and everything will be removed and traffic will be going back as it was before summer started. So it's kind of been a long process with the 80 ramps and then going into the paving. So should be wrapped up here shortly.
It looks really nice.
Drives
Nice
really
and
nice too,
smooth.
doesn't it?
Yes.
Rides really nice.
Well, thank you. Second business here is the post-mounted solar speed displays that we put up on Mambrin Drive and Thorman. It was about 8 months ago now on either side of Adam Court. On the request of Police Department Sergeant Leday here, next week we'll be moving them to Lock Haven, either side of the school zone at McClure. So that will be installed by Public Works staff next week. And that'll be its new home for said time until it finds a new home from there, because these are not permanent structures. They're placed in areas that we have problems and we move them around. So last bit, our stormwater crew is out cleaning catch basins for the rainy season. So you see the big blue and white truck, vac truck. That's our guys out cleaning the catch basins so our streets don't flood and cars can travel and get where they need to go. So that's all I got.
All right. Thank you. Sergeant Leday.
Mike stole my thunder as far as the solar array boards, but
You're a team.
they're definitely, they're portable. They're not designed for permanent installation. So that's hit that 8-month mark. It's more or less just letting neighbors know now how fast cars are going. I think it's done its job for now.
Now, are those public works items or police department items?
Those
I
are
was
actually
wondering
police
who budgets
department.
for it.
Those are police department items
Okay,
there.
just off, if you could answer, do we have need for more of those? Because I've talked to people who said, hey, you know, I really like the one, like on River Road coming into town, where the speed drops to 40. And they like it over here and they like it over there, but I know some that are not.
To answer that question
Free.
as best I can is, yes, I've had numerous neighbors ask about those. We have our portable trailers that we actually put out into our neighborhoods.
How many?
So we own 2 of those, and then we have 2 of the signs. The signs are more of a
Yeah.
long-term, but temporary. The trailers are more or less, I'll put them out for a week to 2 weeks at a time. So there is expense that's involved with those, and no, we don't have a continual budget for those.
Well,
So that's the reason why we don't have
Budget season's coming
more.
up next spring. No, I'm just saying if somebody else, I mean, I don't want to go to the budget committee meeting and say, hey, the police department needs, I mean, that's like telling the army what they need, you know. Although that's happened, hasn't it?
There's a lot of neighborhoods that would like them.
Yes.
But I don't necessarily believe that there's an absolute need for them. There's
Well-
a difference.
Okay.
They had one on Shoreline, and that was so cool. I rode my bike to get it up to that speed.
Yeah.
It's really cool to go over the speed limit on the bike.
I know we have lots of expenses, but if you need, if you thought, or if the group, the chief, since he does the budget, thinks that we need some more, maybe some of us could go in and support that issue. Because I think they're really needed.
Yeah.
I mean, again, everything's all about money. I do think there's a lot more important things that the city does need in other areas, including more. If it was just up to me, we probably would, just to make people more happy.
Yeah.
But again, they have their limited uses, so they're good for a period of time.
yeah.
And then they can actually encourage individual folks to do silly things.
Bicycles too fast.
You can go 40 miles an hour.
Well, that's cool.
And I still maintain that if you have to put a speed blinker out, that means people are generally driving fast. So it's probably the design of the street, not necessarily there is always the 1 or 2% that want to drive fast regardless, but. Okay, anything else? Okay, Councilor Goldberg.
Thank you, Chair DePlazzi. Again, I appreciate the input about the things we talked about tonight. I think that it's valuable to have that input, and you guys always handle it in a professional manner, and I appreciate that very much. I've only got a whole page of stuff to bring back to council.
We're late on you. All right, seeing nothing else on the agenda, I will adjourn until our next meeting, which is October 10th. Okay.
I have some stuff. I went online to get some, somebody come in here and ask
October
about
7th at what time?
Willamette Valley that is a PDF, and I printed out 1 or 2 of those.